Hello. It's Friday afternoon, 6 o'clock. So it's time for Lawman and Carmen B's show, Courtside. Now, you can see, obviously, it's just Lawman. Carmen B's not with me. She may call in a little bit later, but she had something to do. So tonight's episode is called Lawman Shuffle. So I'll probably shuffle around subject matter. I intend to educate and enlighten. And please, as always, chat with me, ask me questions, because we want to talk about criminal law, criminal justice, anything in that vein, as well as new laws and things that you should look out for in the criminal justice system. So I'm going to be pretty wide open tonight on anything, but should be fun. So let's start off with nothing that I say creates an attorney-client relationship with anyone. And it doesn't mean that I represent you in anything, and I'm not giving you advice as to what you should do on your personal matters. We're going to talk in general in the law and things about what to do as citizens and sort of help everybody along. So it's just Lawman here tonight. We're at my place now, kicking it. And the first thing I want to say is goodbye to Paul Mooney, a comedian. I saw he passed away, and I saw someone say he's a comedian who never gave in, something like that, never gave in to the pressures and stuff of mixing over and doing something that he didn't want to do, so sort of similar to a David Chappelle stand when it came to the his show and whether there were differences and whether he would walk away from money and stuff. I remember Mooney back with Pryor and the old comedians, Red Fox and things like that. Very funny guy, dry humor, but very, very funny. So goodbye, comedian Mooney. Now, first thing I want to talk about tonight is probation terms. And what I mean by that is, if you did not know, this year, a law changed. And now, and me and Carmen talked about this before, now, for certain offenses, if you are on 5 years probation and you're currently on that probation, you may be allowed to go in and petition the court to terminate that probation early, as well as then get an expungement. You may do that in felony cases if, in fact, it is not a DV case, sex case, or a case that involves serious or violent offense. So those would be excluded. But if you're on probation for other offenses, and it's 5 years, 4 years, the new law requires probation to be 2 years. So you can petition the court for your probation to terminate early. And what that would mean is that you would be off of any conditions of probation, as long as, and this is going to be real important, as long as you have paid off all of your fines, your fees that you had, restitution and things like that, served all time, done all programs that you had to do. If you've done all of that stuff and it's after the second year of probation and it falls into the category of non-DV, domestic violence, no sex case, or serious or violent felony, then you can terminate probation early. For felonies, it would go from 5 to 2. And that could be very significant if you're on a search and seizure type of condition. It would eliminate that. And also, after the 2 years, you can go in and have it expunged. So misdemeanors, though, would usually be 3 years probation, but now it's 1. So you can go in if you're past your first year and petition the court to actually terminate probation and expunge the crime. Now, that's going to be important when it comes to trying to get jobs and what you must report and not report. So I got to tell you now, it can get confusing when you don't know what to report regarding your criminal record. And I always tell people, just read the question very carefully. Read what they're asking you to report. If it's regarding a state job, a county job, or something like that, government job, they're going to ask you about cases that you may have had in the past, even though you have gotten them dismissed. They're going to ask you to report them. And if you do not report them, then they will feel that you are not disclosing things to them. So it's going to be very important to read that question very, very, very carefully. So if an employer knows that you have a criminal record, what can they do about it? Well, I know that there were some labor laws recently passed that discuss whether an employer can make a move until after they have offered you employment. Now, what that means is, if in fact you've left something off of an application and the application said, do this, leave it on, an employer could view that as you're not being honest with them. Now, if in fact it's a mistake, you can explain, but that's the feeling they'll have, is that you're not being honest with them. And that's why I say, always read the application's question very carefully as to what they're asking for. Are they asking for any arrest? Are they asking for just convictions of misdemeanors or of felonies? So read it very, very carefully and know your record before you start applying and stuff. Everybody should know their criminal record so that you can deal with it when the time comes in terms of expungements, termination of probation, and things like that. So along with that, so now we know we can terminate probation early and possibly get the case expunged. There are new laws this year that allow the court, the judge, to determine whether or not a misdemeanor resolution could be done on diversion. Now, diversion is a word, it kind of means what it says, to divert something. And what would be happening is that you would divert any finding of guilty in your case until and if you have done certain things that the court would require. So usually diversion could be 1 year, 2 years, whatever the court will require and whatever you can negotiate. But you would have to do maybe community service, certain programs, child rearing programs, life skills programs, whatever would be proper for any kind of punishment for the crime. And what would occur is they would suspend basically any entry of any judgment until and if you finish the requirements of your diversionary period, which is usually 1 year, but usually 2 years at the most. And once you finish that requirement, then you can come back to court and the case can be dismissed. So for all misdemeanors now, diversion may be had. There is a battle over whether or not DUIs will fall into that category. And it's been a battle throughout the state in every county. Lawyers are chronicling which departments are granting those motions, which departments are not, in various jurisdictions over the 52 counties in California. So people are keeping track of whether or not DUIs are being allowed to be dealt with diversion. And the pushback is because DUIs are what we call priorable offenses, meaning if you pick one up today, a misdemeanor today, it's going to stay on your record for DMV as well as for criminal purposes to be used against you within a 10-year period if you pick up one within 10 years. So because diversion ends with dismissal, it's sort of like people are getting DUIs dismissed and not coming back and facing the consequences. So there's a pushback on that. In fact, I believe Governor Newsom has agreed to sign legislation that would reverse the giving of diversion for DUIs. But until that happens, this entire year, I'm pretty sure lawyers are going to be pushing for it in the right case. You want to pick the right case, the right time, You don't want to pick an egregious misdemeanor, someone's very high blood alcohol level, accident, things like that. Those are not the diversion ones, or at least seem to be the diversion ones, but the ones where you're very close, or even under the BAC amount of 0.08, or there's drugs in the system that can't be quantified fully, to where they affect the ability to drive. So it's a very, very close case. Diversion may be proper. Now, we've had in our collaborative courts, we've had mental health diversion, and we've also had veterans court diversion. So diversion is not an uncommon theme of ways to resolve your case. It's actually, it provides, I guess if you want to talk about justice systems being able to help an individual, then diversion and mental health court and things like that are ones that are specifically designed to do that. They would look at punishment as a secondary thing, but giving an individual an opportunity to improve themselves over a year period of time and earn that diversion seems to be very helpful. I'm sure it reduces the rate of recidivism. So to jump off the law for just a minute, because the law can get boring, but something else happened earlier this week, and it was Malcolm X's birthday. Now, I got to tell you, if you do not know about Malcolm X, you probably should. You probably have heard about him somewhere else. And I'm going to treat my audience as you know him. Okay. I will tell you this about Malcolm X, just a couple of things. For me personally, he was an inspiring figure. When he would want to educate and inspire others. He had a good heart, and he was very honest and true. And examples. Well, I'll tell you this about the good heart and honest and true, is that it seemed that when Malcolm would speak, he would often give praise to individuals who came before him, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad or whoever it was. But he would also express how he would love his people. And that one of the things he wanted us to do was to love each other. And his speeches could be very inspiring in that way, and how he expresses his love for his people. He and many, many leaders in our communities loved their people so much that they would die for them. And that's exactly what happened. Now, any controversy over his death is going to go on for a while, but you got to understand, he was an inspiring figure who, for me personally, was a very, very inspirational figure. I stumbled upon the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. And upon reading it through, I hadn't read a book in a while, but this one, it gripped me, and it taught me one thing. It taught me everyone can be redeemed. Everyone can have a good side to them and turn from wherever they were going. It's similar to the recidivism problems that we have, the mass incarceration problems that we have. If we attack things with the ability to heal individuals, then society would be far better off in the long run. But more specifically, we as African Americans amongst ourselves would not be hurting each other. It would be helping more in terms of pushing the community together. One thing about his honesty, the second part, was how he basically called out, or at least brought to light, what he felt was dishonesty in the Muslim religion, and how he had to step away from it because he did not want to follow and do what others he probably could not respect would do. Took a big step on his part. He also was a type of man who, when he was wrong or taught something differently, he wasn't afraid to accept it. Sometimes we get involved in our lives and we move on in this life, and one of the things we don't do is start listening to people and listening to ourselves. And one thing that would impress me about Malcolm was when he did his Hajj. the trip to Mecca and came back and wrote about all these white Muslims and, with blue eyes and everybody sat in brotherhood. It was quite enlightening for him from where he had come. And he felt that he wasn't being told everything and had to learn so much more. And we learn by listening to each other and by feeling the vibes of each other a lot of times. So I admire that he was able to change his whole philosophy when he felt he was wrong. Now, one thing he did and didn't get to complete was he also was talking about bringing the crimes of the U.S., which would be at the time, of course, Jim Crow laws, and just maybe police brutality, same as today, so to speak, but a lot of the issues that were going on then, he wanted to bring up to the world, sort of bringing a lawsuit against the United States, so to speak, in the United Nations to get other countries to look at that and say, make a judgment somehow. That would have probably been, there's a movement, I think, today going on about bringing things to the United Nations, especially the police killings, to have them comment on it or speak on it or something. But him doing it back then, I think, was unique because, if you remember, in 1964, we had Selma walk across the bridge and Selma's the battle and Bloody Sunday and things like that. And it was one of the first times that these kinds of acts were caught on camera, caught on film, and pretty much shown in the world. And it was shortly after that Lyndon Johnson then signed Civil Rights Act next year, Voting Rights Act, right in a row, 64, 65. And I think there was a lot of pressure to do so at that time because film media had brought the civil rights movement, which in America, to the world. And we see that parallel today somewhat, in that I remember the days of Rodney King, and I remember everyone was fascinated at the fact that someone had videotaped what was going on across the street. And I mean, a fairly long videotape. Back then, the recorders were probably huge. Not too many people could have them. Definitely, we didn't have cell phones and things like that. So it would be very hard to create media out of an event. But that individual did. And we watched at the time, and those who weren't around, you can listen to the history of it. There were people who were brought to justice, or at least tried as a result of that incident, which the claim was not whether he ran from the police or not. The issue was pretty much when should they have stopped using force upon him? What would be excessive force upon him? And as you watch the video, you can judge for yourself. But it was one of the first times that we had that kind of thing. And I remember also at that point in time, not really taking in the fact that how significant it is that cameras are now going to change the world, so to speak. But I knew it was important. And just like today, we film everything. We as humans, we film everything. It's not just pictures. It's when things go wrong. We seem to have a camera there. We require police officers to wear the body cams at all times. Don't turn them off. Keep them on, because they can break both ways. Police officers would use them and say, hey, this is going to show that I did the right thing. And communities would be able to judge that, as we have when body cams are gave up to families and lawyers and things like that. So that move of the film, of media taking place and changing things has definitely created a rise in a lot of incidents we are able to witness now that we would not have been able to witness before. So, example of a changing world, a changing nation, right? Different things happening, so to speak, all at once, creating different social change. And we're using our media in order to create it. So it's an interesting move, but let me take it all the way back to Malcolm. And notice how he lives on through photographs and films and books and things like that. You know, people who make an impact actually do live on in that way. But you see more of Malcolm today than you probably ever have and stuff. And remember in the 80s when it was coming back with, wearing the X hats and things like that, I don't know if a lot of people truly grip, who he was at the time. And hopefully they do today. So it was his birthday, and I think it would have been his 96th birthday. And I believe his family hung out at the thing that they have down in Harlem, the museum. We keep his spirit alive in that he did love his people, and he would do everything to be honest and lead his people. And we need that kind of leadership today. We have to have individuals like Stacey Abrams, down in Georgia. We've got to have people who are standing their ground and who are doing things in different jurisdictions. And they must network. They must have a common goal to move forward. Because even now, I noticed even last week, more legislation, I believe in Florida, trying to block voting rights and things like that. And and I'll tell you something, look, in life, we have cause and effect, right? You do something, something's going to be affected by it. It just appears to me that somehow when the election was won in Georgia, and simply because people, through their hard work, educated individuals to come out and do one act, which signifies them as American citizens, and that's to vote. When that was exercised to its fullest, which you got to believe was the intent of the individuals, the framers and all that, you have to believe that was one of the things they wanted to maintain is a healthy vote and a voting system. That to create legislation as a response to then hinder individuals from voting just seems to be disingenuous from the top. It just seems to be this cause and effect that doesn't allow me to say, are you trying to get along? Are you trying to help everyone? Or what is the attitude that's prevailing out there that means that when we try to bring forth freedom and justice, that the opposite may happen, that individuals may want to change laws in order to take away freedoms and justice. And it should not be that way. Let's not be mistaken. But we see that happening. I think I saw it happening when the protests began after George Floyd. What we saw people out there, people loving, people doing a protest, the biggest in American history, doing what they have the right to do under the Constitution. And yet it started turning. You could say that there began to be a backlash, a reaction to individuals, spearheaded somewhat by Trump when he decided to go down and kind of clear people out so that he can show the Bible and stuff. Little things, if you would notice back then, things were happening like that. Now cops were driving into people. Now people were driving into people. We had some people shooting people. We had lots of violence break out. And they were watching individuals who created the violence, and they didn't seem like they were the individuals who were the protesters. So when something good, kumbaya's going on, we're protesting and things like that, where is this backlash coming from? And why is it strengthening and so powerful? Why? And you see it also when people say Black Lives Matter. You'll hear a chorus that says, well, Blue Lives Matter. And then you'll hear a chorus that says, well, all lives matter. And you got to wonder, well, I just stated one point of fact. Why must there be a retort? Because a retort is not requested. You're making a statement. If blue lives want to matter, blue lives would matter all the time too. If all lives matter, yes, they do all the time. But the protest was specifically to deal with the harm that had been coming, the harm that at least had been now caught on video of individuals who have encounters with police officers. Now, that's been a very, very, very touchy subject. I collect videos and videos of individuals who are trying to train individuals on how to behave under the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment and things like that. I call them sort of like storm chasers, individuals who go out and they intentionally want to draw attention to the cops so that they can exercise their rights and make the cop look kind of stupid on video. So, hold on. So, I look at these individuals and I call them like storm chasers, because they're chasing to cause the conflict, towards the conflicts and things like that. And they make videos, where they're filming the cops and how they react and stuff like that. They're sort of out there touching the fire, okay? And they're trying to show that a lot of officers don't understand the constitutional amendments that give individuals personal freedoms. So when we see the rise in the officer brutality, so to speak, individuals who are shot and they do not have weapons, individuals who may be shot and running away or doing something like that, definitely not committing felonies. We see a rise in that as some sort of maybe retort or some sort of backlash, somewhat, for calling out the behavior in the first place. You can draw some parallels to that, but it just is the theme that seems to go down, that when one takes an action, there is this huge reaction. And I'll tell you, there was a theory, you had the redlining and stuff, right? We know about that, about restricting individuals from where they can live. But, we have always had structures in place that would keep individuals from doing things. But now they become a little bit more hidden. They become a little bit more subtle in a way. And so when we go back to that voting, that one big thing, Malcolm was very big on the voting, he knew that the ballot or the bullet. And the voting, the one tool that we would think that the constitutional writers and stuff would want to really preserve, right? The one thing they'd want to uphold and could not have anything going against it, that why would there be a retort when it maybe didn't work out for certain people? Because we're messing with our system. And we've seen this happen because of poll taxes in the 60s and things like that, having to answer these crazy questions just to vote, unlike other individuals. And that is, in essence, due process violations, equal protection violations. So, we violate the Constitution in order to deal with a constitutional issue, in a way, voting. So I harp on voting because every person who is 18 and who is not in prison, who is not on parole, should be voting. Every person should do that. It's a privilege, right? You can call it whatever you want, but you can also call it a tool. You can call it freedom. You can call it the ability to change. So voting is extremely important. I talk to people every day. I bug them, basically, about their knowledge about whether they can vote or not and should they vote. And you hear a lot of things that people, old feelings that, they couldn't vote, their vote wouldn't matter, or and things like that. But matter or not, it's just something, an exercise we have to practice. We have to practice it together. Everybody does it, And when everybody does it, good results. Now, I'll tell you something, know your history, go back to Reconstruction period, okay? One of the things people forget is when they passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitution, it set us free from slavery, 13th Amendment. However, if you're incarcerated, they can institute it. 14th Amendment said you're now citizens. You have equal protection. You have a right to pursue life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? And then the 15th Amendment, hey, you can vote too. You got that power too. All the rights that belong to citizens belong to you. And people exercised them. They bought land, they voted, they created and participated in cities and things like that. Former slaves, it was slave today, slave no more. However, we know that forces also had to stock up labor that they had just lost. And one of the ways of doing that was after the 13th, 14th, 15th, and after blacks began to be prominent, was to just burn the places down or use violence in order to affect them and sort of wipe them away, decrease their potency, and similar the vote here today. We have an attitude somewhat of, it doesn't work. And that's just great for people who doesn't want it to work for us, for anyone. And so we got to lose that attitude, number one, and then practice and exercise your right to vote. If you've never done it before in your life, what a great time to do it. And along with that, you got to know your constitutional rights, the amendments that I talk about. Take 1 to 15. I mean, there are free booklets given out with the Constitution in it. And I think every citizen should read it. If people come from other countries here and they have to study our Constitution and things like that, and they know it better than people who may be living here, then it's probably a shame, okay? I mean, it probably is. We should be concerned about that, about our lack of knowledge of our constitutional rights, which of course, streams me over to remind you about something. And that's knowing your rights and what they are and what you can do with them. I would be remiss to not talk about that now that, this is the Lawman Shuffle, right? So we're going to talk about things, all things. So I want to tell you what I teach. And first, why I teach. I teach it to save lives, period. Saving lives, the key. And I'll explain how that happens. Because if in fact you use what I try to train, what I try to explain, I believe it will save your life. Now, what is it that you got to do? What do I need to know, right? Because the way I frame all of my presentations are that you should know certain things to do so that you can protect yourself and protect your case or whatever is going to come out of this down the road. You want to go home at night, just like everybody. So the thing you got to know is that until the relationship between you and an officer is defined, it's consensual. Now, that just means I can talk to them, they can talk to me, they can ask me questions, they can do things, stop me and want to talk to me all they want, just like any citizen could. But what you got to know is it's your constitutional right not to provide information. And you want to define the relationship. If you're just walking down the street and a person says, "Hi, how you doing?" and you get into a conversation and you walk away, do you think you have created a relationship with that person? Probably not. 5 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever that we sit and talk, we're not in a relationship now. But that's different when it comes to police officers and the citizens. It's different. There has to be a definition of the relationship in order to know how the officers are approaching you. So, what I always teach is there are 5 words you just need to mumble out. If you just remember the 5 words, because no matter what is being said to you, you would like to express these 5 words. And the words are, am I free to go? Basically, translated, can I leave? Can I go? I see you talking to me. You're asking me all these questions, but can I go? Because what you're saying is, officer, I'm going to hold you to task because our 4th Amendment says that for you to detain me, stop me from what I'm doing, encounter me legally, that you have to have a reasonable suspicion that I'm engaged in some criminal activity. If you do not, then whatever you found later on, whatever happened later on, could be damaging civilly or criminally, for the officer. So the first thing, am I free to go? Because there's only 2 answers really to that, right? Yes. And you know what you should do. If you hear a yes, you should probably walk on. That would be the best advice I can give you. Go ahead and walk. Drive away, whatever you're doing. Because you do not have to engage with police officers. And the Supreme Court supports that. Florida versus Royer. Royer. 1983's United States Supreme Court case. I quote that case, cite it all the time, because you can go out on Google and type that in, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You see, when we made this institution, police officers, they are to serve and protect the citizens, and that is the first duty to do so. However, we have created them also to what people always say is get the bad guy, you see. It's just that sometimes it's hard figuring out who the bad guy is all the time. And you can't presume that everybody's the bad guy until they are vetted by you. The founders didn't want that kind of force on people. That's why they wanted some individual rights, liberties, and things like that. That's why the whole purpose of the amendments. Because they deal with that. The 4th, the 1st and 2nd, the 4th and 5th and 6th Amendments, we hold dear the right to be free from searches and seizures, the right to not incriminate yourself, and the right to have a jury trial, a lawyer, a jury of your peers, the right to cross-examine witnesses and call witnesses on your behalf. These were rights that they wanted to make sure got into the Constitution. So that's what I back, or that's what I cite. That's my backing for what I say. Because what you're doing by saying, am I free to go, is you are now defining that relationship with an officer. You're defining it that it's not consensual, that you're not there to just talk about things. And when that occurs, then an officer to go on and detain you, to stop you, prevent you from going anywhere, what they must do is have that articulable suspicion that a crime has occurred or will be occurring. And that's hard to draw up if they were just guessing, if they were just messing with people, right? So you ask that question, they say no. Okay, you can't go. But they don't have me in handcuffs. They don't have me in the back seat of the car. I mean, I can just get up probably and walk away. You shouldn't. And they do have you detained under the law. So if you want to find out all the definitions of detained, whatever they are, they have you detained at that particular point, which means control over you. You can't leave now. And because of that, that's why you have to determine what is the nature of our relationship. And once you do that, then you're going to kick in the 5th Amendment. And this is why I call it exercising your rights, because you've got to kick them in. You don't get swole unless you lift weights, You don't build your body unless you lift weights. You don't get faster as a runner unless you practice and work at getting faster. So your rights do not work for you unless you exercise them, period. If you don't use them, then, you lose them. So you must say at that particular point, or you can, hey, since I'm detained and I don't want to talk to you, I choose not to. I will take the 5th from here on in. And now that I'm detained, and depending on your jurisdiction, show your ID. That's pretty much all you got to do. Identify yourself, and then you watch. You just watch. You have to watch and see, observe way more than talk. Because it goes wrong right when talking starts becoming an overbearer on the relationship. When we have something to say, something to prove, we're angry sometimes because an officer pulled us over and it's a bogus thing. And believe me, I mean, that happens all the time. And the key is that we expect officers to just change because of George Floyd and other incidents that have occurred. We expect them to just change. No, they kind of ramped it up a little bit, They kind of, it's not something that they're going to just everybody take a step back. You would have liked to see that. Hey, we should all take a step back. But that wasn't going to happen because you can't change people like that. What you do, though, is change yourself. You pick up these tidbits, you practice them so that if a situation arises, am I free to go? Then here's my ID, because I understand I'm being detained and I'm speaking this out. Really, don't need all these words. And I'll take the Fifth Amendment and not speak to you. So please do not interrogate me, is what you're saying. Because people always want to bring up this Miranda rights thing. Well, shouldn't they have given me my rights? Now, I always look at that and I go, wow, if you sit back and wait for any cop to just give you your rights, you might not be approaching this the right way. Okay? It might be good that you go out and get affirmative information that's going to allow you to know your rights and exercise them properly and keep them healthy. And when your mouth shuts up and you sit and you wait, you're not fighting. You're not resisting. You gave them nothing but the law. And they are law enforcement officers. So whether they tell you or not, they understand the law. So you got to remember, and I preach this over and over, you got to remember those things to lay the boundaries of your conversation with officers first by, am I free to go? And if you're not free to go, then you can take the Fifth Amendment and not incriminate yourself. And you say, and I hear people, did I just hear people say, well, Keith, why don't you just, look, and that's cooperate. If you have nothing to hide, just go on and tell them everything. If you're innocent, that's what you would do. And I'm going to listen to you. And I'm going to say, yeah, that could occur. That's a possibility. But, officers, in terms of interrogating, they can lie to you. I mean, they could say that they have something and that they don't. And part of that is the intimidation on an individual who has the guilty conscience to come forth and say, okay, it's me. I did it. Now, we saw and we've learned of the story of the Central Park Five and if you look at that, you'll see the confessions and things that are made. And these kids pretty much didn't even know each other. We saw how parents are brought in and sort of pressure the kid to say something because they're promised you're going to go home. And I always say the parent is not what the kid needs if, in fact, they're encountering law enforcement in a negative way. If they're after school and get to throw the siren on, great. But if it's a negative way out in the street, then the parents are not the ones who should come. It should be a lawyer. Yeah, the kids can say that word too. I want a lawyer. And I should leave it at that. They want a lawyer to talk to. Because parents usually get put in a room and it's an effort to maybe pressure the kid a little bit, to have the kid say something that the kid probably didn't do, just to solve the crime, so to speak. So your children have to be taught their rights, knowing how to exercise their rights, not just hold on to them and never use them. Because if you're waiting around for the officers to read you the Miranda warning, then it's gone too far. You are literally under arrest at that particular point, and you are in the custody, definitely of law enforcement. And so now they can question you, but they must read you rights before they question you. So you got to always look at how do I preserve myself? And this preserves ourselves. We're not running, we're not fighting, we're not doing anything. We're not getting loud. You calmly have to practice such things. You really do. Because you just never know when it's your time. A cop is behind you or something, they encounter you and they want to talk to you about something, and you don't want to talk to them, which is completely every citizen's right. So being forced to cooperate with them may not necessarily be the way out or the way to behave at that point. And if you want to do it, you will do it. If you think you know more than them, you will talk about that. And it might come to your detriment, and then you'll learn that maybe you just be quiet and wait and see what someone has against me. What are they alleging? What can they allege? So there's your know your rights speech. You can always get information about that from me and anybody I know, because I'm talking about that all the time. So we talked a lot about how to terminate probation early and go in for an expungement. There's something that if that applies to you, it's something that you might want to look into. We talked a lot about diversion and how it is a preferable way of resolving your case when you don't have a record, when you're doing a lot of things in life. You're a baseball manager, you are a deacon at the church, and you have all these responsibilities. You got children and things like that, and something bad happens to you. Whereby you can be offered a second chance, so to speak. We talked about Malcolm and Mooney losing those, or at least about Malcolm's birthday and losing Paul Mooney. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about, well, we talked about knowing your rights, obviously. But the last, and voting rights, things like that. Last thing I saw in an article that during a jail call that it's Greg McMaster said about Anand that he did a good deed. I'm reading it, I'm vouching for it, but that's what the article said, is that he's talking to someone and says that he does a good deed by killing him. And then I started reading other articles, 2 or 3, well, at least one from New York City, and the other, I think I wrote down what they said. But in both of these, it was almost retired or retired police officers who were taking on a different persona. Like in New York City, the officer mentioned about shaving his head and now going full tilt. He would talk about and laugh about how he would pull his weapon on African Americans during duty to sort of scare them, things like that. That he got a real kick out of that, and he's talking and bragging about it now, And so I look back at the Greg McMaster statement and I go, 2 individuals talking and bragging pretty much about harming Black people. And then I keep remembering the articles, and I can't say which force, but in which state right now. But the articles that came out about police who would be talking and didn't know they were being recorded and talk about how they can't wait for the next race war. And, they just want to grab their gun and just kill a bunch of Black people, stating, and you got to figure they're stating their intent, of what they want to do, shaping their lives in that particular way. And maybe that's what they feel and think. You usually don't say things that inflammatory unless you believe them. So it just concerns me that we're hearing this kind of thing more and more too. And then we're lucky, of course, body cams and recordings that kind of catch things like that. But when you put it in perspective, I got to go, because I'm a criminal lawyer. So I'm going, well, what does all that really mean? Is that the intent of individuals? Do they really want to do these things? I mean, they're setting out to do them. I mean, do they really want to do these things? And then you got to wonder, well, who are they friends? Who do they hang out with? And do they want to do these things? Do they agree? So it makes you wonder sometimes about where we are in our state of race relations, and that it may appear that we're pretty poor in that, because I saw also an article about some kids who were reenacting the George Floyd 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and the kid was wearing blackface around, and you got to wonder, these kids looked about 10, 11 years old, and I go, wow, they're pretty sophisticated because they knew to wear blackface, right? Good kids who are colorblind, right? Didn't change the color. I mean, it's sad that they're doing this thing, but really, blackface? Okay. Interesting how they learned to do that, So we got to start looking at keys and signs and things of moral character that's going away. And watch out for the needles and the arrows and the spears that are thrown at each other on the sake of the left or the sake of the right wing individuals who clash in the political war that we have go on. We have to really be careful, because we've seen a lot since January 6th of criticism against others on the other aisle, so to speak, as to what they can and cannot do and how they feel and things like that. And it's getting to be more trash talky and more trash talky each time. So the storming of the castle, so to speak, is sort of an expression too of individuals' feelings. And you can't overlook that kind of stuff. If we're going to be great citizens, we've got to be great. So we have to think about such things. We will put them all in perspective, and we will get up the next day and try to be the best person, hopefully, that we can be. Now, a lot of preaching goes on tonight. A lot of preaching. But if a few people are hearing what I'm saying, I'm never selfish with the thoughts. Please tell others that inform someone, educate someone. There's nothing more pleasing than to educate someone, or at least give them a tidbit of something. Give them information that they did not have before they met you. So I'm all about spreading the word on things, being active in our communities, and, voting, all of that stuff. We kind of have earned the right through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment in order to have that kind of freedom attached to us. So if it is attached to us and we do not use it, then we're wasting our talent. We're wasting our days and stuff. So we definitely have to utilize what we are given and become stronger as communities. Now, let's see. It's right around this time when Carmel asked me, do I have any tidbits or anything like that? And believe it or not, I had a great tidbit. I ran across a Langston Hughes poem, and it struck me for two reasons. Number one, in college, I performed a lot of Langston Hughes poems in what would be called the forensics activity or forensics team. And what it was we'd go around and perform speech and debate type things when I was at San Francisco State. And so I would do a lot of Langston Hughes poems. They seem to be very colorful and they flow and things like that. And it brought me, so I saw the poem and I pulled it down and I said, wow, this is actually a great inspirational poem. And I looked through my briefcase when I got here and I realized, I forgot the poem. So I'll have to do it in another time, but you're going to like this poem. And I'm not going to say what it is, so you can go look at it in advance, but those may want to go look at some Langston Hughes poems and just reacquaint yourself with the way he would put a little style and jazz in his storytelling. you can do it. So I'm coming upon my time. I want to thank anyone who's out there. May not be many, maybe a lot tomorrow. Who knows? But I want to thank you for hanging out with me. Um, Obviously, I like to talk. I like to impart knowledge. I like to educate, inspire. You know, and I'll continue to do so. And I look forward to next week when my partner Carm will be here. This is the first episode actually that you've seen me without a mask because I'm a masker. That's why you've seen episodes with me wearing it. Although vaccinated, both of us, me and Carm, I still will wear it to show that it is okay to do so. So this is my first show unmasked. But I'll go back to it when Carm gets back. I'm going to wish everyone peace this weekend. Be careful as what you do, where you go, as always. And I'm going to thank you for being a good citizen. Thank you for trying to be good citizens. Thank you for getting up and trying to help other people because, it's a tough world out there. And it's even tougher for some more than others when you don't have anything. So always think about doing the good, doing the right thing all the time. And we will be back, Lawman and Carmen B. Same bat channel and time. Get your YouTube channel here, 6 o'clock next Friday. And please offer suggestions. We hope to move into a different phase through the summer here of bringing in guests and things like that to discuss these same issues when it comes to criminal justice, criminal law, and things like that. We're just trying to educate the community, trying to be as real as possible in terms of what are the real answers, what are consequences that may occur. So I want to thank you as we plug off, and I will tell you that Lawman is out. Thank you.